Welcome to Your American Dream. I'm Anisha Jennings, and today I'm so excited to welcome Michal Tapia to the show. Michal is the founder of Tapia Consulting and creator of the Courage Connection, where she designs and facilitates courageous spaces for leaders and teams. A proud Dominican American, first generation Latina, and mother, she brings over 20 years of experience across nonprofit, healthcare, and corporate spaces. Michal is also pursuing her doctorate in organizational leadership at Lehman College, where her research focuses on psychological safety for Latina professionals. Using her lived journey, emotional intelligence, and expertise, she empowers leaders to step into visibility, lead authentically, and operationalize courage in every area of their work. Welcome, Michal. So good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anisha.
Thank you. So, tell us about your journey from where you started and, to all the amazing things that you're doing, and how did you start your consulting firm?
Thank you, Anisha. Thank you for asking. So, first, I just want to thank you for creating this platform and amplifying women's stories. What you're doing is such a powerful and inspiring thing. It just reminds us that our voices matter and that sharing them is not just an act of courage, but also an act of service. So, I just appreciate being here with you today.
Thank you. I'm
Um,
humbled.
My name is Michal Tapia, as you said, and I'm a proud Afro Latina, Dominican American, mother of three, doctoral student, consultant, and the
Yes.
founder of Tapia Consulting and the Courage Connection. And wow, I can speak for hours on my journey. But where my journey started, I would say, is I was born and raised in New York City by Dominican parents that immigrated from the Dominican Republic. And it's just been a fascinating journey for me to be here today as an entrepreneur. Growing up, like many other Latinas, we didn't really have a blueprint of what, the professional world would be. So I've had to kind of like figure things out on my own.
Hmm.
And it's been great, it has its pros and cons, not having that representation, but it's also pushed me to try the unknown, to
Yes.
figure things out and not have everything figured out. And it's just been a beautiful journey, like starting my own business, being the first in my family to be a doctor. I'm manifesting this, Anisha.
Yes, you
Uh,
will
and
soon.
just figuring out as I go. I mean,
Yes.
I don't have all the answers, but at least I've mustered up the courage to try things, even not knowing what was next and not having, everything perfect.
Right, right. Amazing. Thank you for telling us that. And you spoke about courage and you have the Courage Connection. Tell us a little more about what the Courage Connection is. How did it come into being, and how does it represent you?
Yes, thank you. So the courage connection. Well, for me, everything has, started with courage because, as an introvert, it has been really difficult to use my voice and put myself out there, right? Like visibility.
Yes.
So I remember as a young child, like writing in a journal, and that was kind of like therapy for me. Like it
Mm,
was the best way for me to express my feelings without feeling overwhelmed.
right.
So how the courage connection became was just that. I wanted a space where I could show up as myself, my authentic self, and share my learnings along, my lived experience, about my lived experience with others. So the courage connection started as just that. It was like therapy for me. I needed a space where I could just share tools and be myself and share my experiences with the world. So I happened to just put it out there on LinkedIn and I got a lot of response, a lot of positive response. Like what I was saying was resonating with so many other folks. And it just inspired me to keep going. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, this makes sense to other people.
Yes.
So why not keep sharing and just build a space where we could come and share our lived experiences and a space where we can connect without any pressure.
How has your lived experience shaped the way you lead and empower others?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. am the oldest of four, in a Dominican household where predominantly Spanish was the first language.
Mm,
So I became an interpreter, in both the healthcare system, the legal system at a very young age,
right.
for my mom. And then, I had to become sort of like my younger sister's caretaker at a very young age.
Mm,
So, navigating what it was to take care of someone else, pay bills, figure everything else out on my own really shaped the way that I just showed up and viewed life. Like I had to like not fail. Like failing was not an option for me.
that's right.
I had to kind of like just say, okay, like I can do this and I'm going to learn the hard way. Like, of
Mhm.
course, there's obstacles in the way that teach us lessons. And at the same time, I feel that, yes, I was very young to try to figure out on my own, but that helped me kind of like build that resilience.
Right. Right.
So from there, it was just like, okay, I am learning as I go. If I'm going to fail, every failure is going to bring me something to learn, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and it's just in my blood, my ancestors, like I have something to prove, like, and all of those things have helped me navigate like really difficult times. And, how my business came about was just, working for an organization, for over 15 years, that becoming my identity. And then losing that position, because our whole department was eliminated, forced
Wow.
me to face, okay, so who am I? What do I contribute? And how am I going to move forward?
Wow.
And that's just been my mantra. Like, first of all, like, done is the new perfect. Thank you to my coach for introducing that mantra to me. And
Yes.
yeah, I don't have to have it all figured out. And also, community is what has lifted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Community is such an important part of any entrepreneur's world, and so much more specifically for immigrant, legal immigrant women, or just legal immigrants who are here, who need a community, who need people. You leave your country and you come here, you need that support, you need systems. So it's just community is a big factor. So you've worked across healthcare, nonprofit, and corporate spaces. What are some of the pivotal lessons that you learned from these environments?
So many lessons. I love that question too.
Tell us a couple, top three lessons that you probably would like to share with others who are in this space, in the journey, and what you wish you knew somebody told you.
Oh, so many things. My goodness. Where do I start?
Yes.
So I think community, tying it back to community, a lot of immigrants, Latinas, women of color are kind of like used to being the caretaker and figuring it all out on their own. But we don't need to figure it all out on our own. Okay.
Absolutely.
Like we said, community is so important. And sometimes, we shrink ourselves because we're either the only ones stepping into the room, we don't see much representation. And I would say one of the things that I've learned is that visibility opens doors,
Yes.
right? Like we've been taught, keep your head down, work hard, do what you have to do, but at the same time, no, it's okay for us to take up space. It's okay for us to show up. It's okay for us, to bring a different perspective of what leadership looks like.
Yes.
So, what I would tell my younger self is don't shrink yourself. You belong, speak up. And, being visible and speaking up is not being too much.
Right. Right.
So that's one of the lessons, learned. I think that one is a really big one. The other is don't make assumptions.
Mm,
Sometimes we get all up in our heads and we become our own worst enemies because we have all these different thoughts. And I think communication is really important.
right.
So ask the questions.
Yes.
Even if it's hard, you don't want to look stupid in front of people and you don't want to look like you're less competent or whatever the case might be. It's okay to speak up
Right.
uh, because you will learn. You will learn whether you like the response or not. Just show up.
Yes.
And then what else can I say? When you show up, when you are visible, you need to reframe like it's not only about you,
Hmm.
also an act of service. You're opening the doors for others to feel comfortable showing up as themselves. So I would add that as well. That's something that I definitely learned the hard way. I thought, showing up was all about me and how people were going to perceive me.
Right.
No, actually, when I opened my mouth and I, showed up very authentically and asked
Right.
questions, the difficult questions, it made others feel safe. It made
Right.
others, feel like they also could open up and ask the questions and also be visible.
Lovely. Talking about safe, you believe that creating safety unlocks possibility. Can you share what psychological safety means in practice and why it's so powerful?
I love that question too. So, Amy Edmondson coined the term of psychological safety as the feeling of showing up without the fear of negative consequences. So, that has been a topic that has been near and dear to my heart because
Mhm.
a lot of times, whether psychological safety shows up or doesn't, it impacts the way that we show up and the way that we innovate and opportunities for folks. So, for me, identity has a lot to do with how we show up in the world and how we perceive psychological safety. So I think it's important, not to only encourage psychological and inclusive spaces and workplaces, but also create systems and processes that foster psychologically safe environments. So, even if it's a hot term,
Yes.
and we all believe that is very important. What are the systems that we're putting in place to foster, folks feeling psychological safety? Folks that come with all of different types of identities, all different types of experiences,
Right.
may experience psychological safety differently.
Right.
So I think it's important to first understand, how people feel safe. What does safety mean to them? And what are the system and processes and the tools that we have in place to foster that?
Amazing. So, what would you say are some of the practices or processes or like the top few tools that, people should, employers should put into practice, or companies or entrepreneurs? What would you say would be some of the tools that they should implement?
That's such a great question as well. And there's so many of them. I would start with practicing vulnerability. A lot of leaders, the way they show up and the way they are received are two very different things. People need to be a little bit more self aware
Hmm.
and practice vulnerability and practice that it's okay to make mistakes, to show up authentically without, negative consequences. I think listening to folks and understanding what feels safe and not making assumptions of what you think, others may feel safe is also very important. And just being culturally competent, I think, is also important, and understanding, the different identities that show up, where people come from, what are their cultural norms, what are some policies that could be put into place that respects, the way that people show up and the way that people feel included and feel like they belong.
Right, makes sense. So, what would be your advice to people of color who are in who are coming to America or who are already here? What would be your advice for them to assimilate, adjust, adapt into this space without losing their identity, or, feeling like, oh, I got to let go of my culture or my accent or my voice? What would be your advice for them to, like, I don't want to say blend in, but like show up. Let's say show up.
Yes, I would say be yourself, be authentic. You don't need to assimilate. You don't need to change who you are in order to fit in. And if you are not accepted, or you are not included, build your own table. So many people see, for example, an accent as an impediment when actually it is a blessing, to speak two languages, to think, in two different languages, or to think in two different cultures is absolutely amazing, and it's hard. I'm not going to say it's not, because I've been in those positions where, you want to start speaking a certain type of way, or you want to start looking a certain type of way in order to be accepted or in order to be viewed, as competent. But I think that it is our responsibility to change those narratives and to own who we are and show up as we are and to find the spaces that accept that. There are going to be a lot of spaces that we don't belong, or the door is not open for us, or they have their certain way of being and thinking. And it's okay for us not to show up in those spaces. We need to find the spaces that accept us for who we are, the people that are going to help us grow. And, if it doesn't exist, we can create those,
Yes, absolutely. So well said. And that's what makes us unique, right? Like every person is so unique. And if you've come here, you've had this lived experience. If you're a person of color, you're an immigrant, you have had this experience of another country, growing up in another country, speaking so many languages. That is your superpower. And you can bring that with you and help grow not only yourself but your organization or your team or your company. So that is really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that the people of color leaders face when they're stepping into visibility and leadership roles?
My goodness, there's so many things. I love this question as well, because one of the biggest challenges for me I can share is unlearning, right? Learning is really powerful, but sometimes unlearning is even more powerful.
Yes.
And we grow up with all these cultural norms that, sometimes we realize as we become adults, was this the right way of thinking? Like, no.
Yes.
And we need to unlearn, like I said earlier, examples of, and sometimes, our parents, have a big role in this. Oh, you should be grateful. My dad was a pastor and he was really religious. And it was like, women have certain roles in society. And, we are not the ones that are speaking up and charting the path and leading the way. So I think one of the hardest things for leaders of colors is unlearning and owning the way they show up and the way that they speak up in certain spaces, particularly in spaces where we are not represented, when we don't see people that look like us. And that could be very intimidating, right? Because we're not used to taking up all this space. We're not used to being, the center of attention a lot of times. A lot of introverts also struggle with being the loudest voice in the room, right? And the concept of what leadership is supposed to look like. And I think that has been also one of the hardest lessons for me, showing up as not myself, but what I think others want to see. And, we just need to start feeling more comfortable in our own skin. We
Yeah.
just need to start feeling more comfortable showing up as we are, whether we're introverted, whether we are not the loudest voice, whether we are empathetic leaders,
Yes.
whether we are, servant leaders, all those things, it's just about changing the narrative of what we are used to seeing. There's a saying that says, you cannot be what you cannot see.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just have to create that vision because it doesn't
Absolutely.
exist.
Absolutely. Everybody has a God given purpose, and it's our duty to find it and make sure we show up. So, how can leaders operationalize courage, not just talk about it, but like practice it in their daily leadership?
Yes, it takes practice, like you said, right? Like it takes baby steps. It takes one step at a time. And it takes, everyone kind of like being on the same page. And it takes vulnerability, right? Like sometimes we need to be courageous. And that doesn't mean that we always have to be the loudest person in the room. That just means we have to look within and understand ourselves and also how we show up. And lastly, most importantly, how people receive us. Because we can say, okay, I believe this and I want to do this. But what are the systems that we have in place? What are the processes? What are you actually doing to make that happen? And it takes self awareness. It takes, working with others, being open to feedback. It takes listening, right? In order to understand, not just to reply, right? And it just takes making mistakes and knowing and owning it, right? We don't all know everything. We don't always have to have all the answers. All leaders don't have to have all the answers. And we need to be able to invite others with different perspectives to leadership positions to change the way that we've been operating for so long.
Absolutely. So you're currently pursuing your doctorate in organizational leadership and you're researching psychological safety for Latina professionals. Why is this research so important right now?
It is more important now more than ever with everything that's happening in the world, and how we're experiencing safety. This topic found me, honestly, as a Latina professional navigating different spaces throughout my life. I've known how it feels, I've experienced how it feels to feel safe in a
Uh-huh.
team, and I've experienced the opposite.
Right,
Right. So I think that, the term psychological safety or the concept, there's a lot of research around that, but there's a gap in the research when it comes to understanding that perception from the Latinas lens and
right,
point of view. And I think that, many Latinas don't feel psychological safe at work. It's been shown through my research. I was able to have conversations with hundreds of women, and identity, it really impacts the way that we show up and the way that we perceive psychological safety. Like we said, accent, bilingualism, ethnicity, gender, all these things impact the way that we perceive safety, and also the systems in place, right? The lack of mentorship, the lack of sponsorship, and the
right,
barriers to advancement and growth, all of that impacts psychological safety. So I've just been blessed, I think, to walk this path, this journey, to try to understand and just lift the voices of what other women, Latina women, are experiencing, and also trying to figure out how we can make this better, how
right.
organizations can make this better, how individuals can make this better.
Right. So, do you have any like inputs for us on how, maybe one or two tips on how organizations can make this better? What are the first steps, like, in practice, or what can they put in place to help with this for any person for that matter? Any person who's working, anybody who's an employee should be treated well and should have that safety.
Yes. Okay, so we can talk about this for hours, Anisha.
Yes.
I am currently in the data analysis stage of my dissertation, and it's just been so fascinating to see all the things that are popping up, all the themes that are coming about this
Wow.
research. What I can say for now is that there definitely needs to be some coping mechanisms put in
Mm,
place for people to help people,
right.
whether it is employee resources, whether it's mentorship and sponsorship, definitely representation, the opportunities to create groups and spaces where people see themselves represented and they have the ability to talk, freely without the fear of repercussions, right? Like a safe space. And we see this in employee resource groups, affinity groups, right? We see these in not only sponsorship, because it's great to have allies sponsoring you, but also sponsorship from folks that understand and can identify with these employees. I think it's important to have Latinas feel like they're included in decision making,
Mm,
having a voice at the table, right? Like being promoted to leadership positions and positions where they can influence and, make decisions and make change and impact change.
right.
All of these things are important. And the list goes on and on and on, Anisha.
Yes, absolutely. It is. It is always a work in progress. So, most of your clients are entrepreneurs, introverts, or mid level professionals. What strategies do you use to help them unlock the influence that they already carry?
I love this. I think it starts with self awareness.
Mm,
We all experience trauma. We
yes,
all have things that we carry from childhood
right.
to adulthood. So I create the spaces where people can come as themselves and not feel like they're being judged. I walk alongside people. I ask the questions that need to be asked. I
Hmm.
model it, and I come from a place where I've experienced all of this. It's not just talking the talk,
Right,
it's knowing that I've been in those situations when
right,
it's hard to sometimes say what's on our mind, when it's hard to speak up, when it's
right.
hard to feel seen, when
Yes.
it's hard to feel like you're making any impact. So I start with, who are we? What is it that we are trying to get out of this, right?
Right.
Also, that's one thing because we cannot make those assumptions for others.
Right.
What seems as a success or a goal or a milestone for someone looks totally different for someone else. And
Absolutely.
then like we need safe space to practice. We're all in these positions where we're working and we don't have that support. A lot of middle managers are in positions where they have to kind of like figure it out on their own. And sometimes they just need that thought partner to be able to talk their ideas with folks, play things out, even practice presenting or speaking up,
Yes.
even practicing, writing and showing up in public spaces. Sometimes that's all we need in order to just build that courage muscle.
Yeah.
So I want to be the representation and the person that I didn't have growing up. I
Yes.
want to be that to others. I want to be able to walk with people, see their success, listen to their issues, brainstorm all of those things, and also create, the space for folks to be able to learn,
Yeah.
like even our allies. Sometimes, people get canceled because they don't know certain things or people don't feel comfortable taking those risks.
Yes.
So I want to be able to create those spaces for our allies and our partners that want to help and want to support us as well.
Amen. So you're doing so many things, right? You said you're a mom of three, you're doing your doctoral program, you have your consulting business. Tell us, what does balance look like? What does integration look like? How do you do it all?
It's so hard. Definitely, definitely. That's one of the things that I've, had a challenge with, First is like trying to take care of everyone else
Yes.
without like taking care of myself. That's one thing that I've struggled with.
Yes.
And I've learned that self-care is just going to help me be just a better mom, a better, entrepreneur, a better student, everything. One of the things that have helped me is just routine and putting everything, Anisha, everything on my calendar.
No,
Okay. If it's not on the calendar, I don't know if it's going to
it's
happen.
not happening.
And
Yes,
even if it is on the calendar, it might not happen. So just
absolutely.
giving myself that grace that
Yes.
it's okay not to do it all,
Yes.
that it's okay to rest, giving me permission to take
Yes.
naps when I need to. Okay.
Absolutely. I think we're all caught up in this cycle of like, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do it all. And we've just been living in that rush culture that we think rest is a luxury, whereas it is something that is really essential for
Yeah.
you to actually grow. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, it's been hard, but like not feeling guilty and not feeling like you have to have it all figured out. And it's okay, like if one day you only have 10% and you're giving 10%, then you know what? You're giving 100%.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, that is so true. So, what is one courageous act that has transformed your life or career?
Oh, visibility, showing up. I mean, even doing this podcast and not having a script,
Yes,
just giving myself permission to not be perfect, to slip up, to not
yes,
have all the answers figured out, right? Like to go with the flow, that's being courageous, to take up space, to share some of my downfalls. And because, like when we go through something, most likely other people may be experiencing the same thing. So
absolutely.
when you share, even though you're putting yourself on the spot and you're being vulnerable,
Yes,
actually, it may help others. It may open the doors for others. So it's okay to be yourself.
yes,
It's okay to not have it all figured out. And it's okay to, figure it out as you go.
absolutely. 100%. So, if you could leave our listeners with one truth about leadership and courage, what would it be?
What a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. I would say it's okay to feel afraid. It's okay to feel like you don't have it all figured out. I think what matters is showing up, sharing your story, and creating space for others along the way. Representation isn't just about being seen, it's about opening doors so others can walk through.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. So, what does working with you look like? And if somebody wants to reach out, what is the best way to get in touch? And What is your program?
Yes, so working with me could look like so many different things, you know? I don't like to be prescriptive, but nowadays I live on these LinkedIn streets. So I would say folks can reach out to me via DM. My LinkedIn profile has my contact information, my email, m.tapiaconsulting@gmail.com. I would just say, I start by just having a conversation with folks because it's all about just alignment and the vibes, and just asking what is it that folks need from me? How can I support folks? So I do one-on-one coaching. I do group coaching. I do thought partnership because sometimes coaching could feel intimidated. I just walk with you along the way. I do facilitation, leadership workshops. I do event experience. So I'm putting together the first ever Latino AI Summit.
Wow.
So it's all about the experience, right? How we show up, how we are received. And I also do keynote speaking. Now I call myself a speaker and I just create processes. I help, organization assess psychological safety. And I bring tools and frameworks to teams, to individuals to just help create that experience of belonging and inclusivity.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your lived experience, and sharing your story. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blessing. Thank you, Anisha, for what you're doing. And it was just great being in this space with you today.
Thank you. I'm honored and humbled. So, thank you again. As we close this inspiring conversation with Michal Tapia, remember that true leadership begins with courage, the courage to show up authentically, to create safety for others, and to amplify voices that need to be heard. If you're ready to reflect your own authenticity and vision through a digital presence that amplifies your work, I'd love to help you design a website that carries your message forward.